We live in this world that's just completely interconnected. Think about it, the power grid that lights our homes, the global economy that stocks our shelves. But what happens when those systems have risks we just can't see? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on some of those hidden dangers. And more importantly, we'll talk about what you can actually do to navigate them. So let's get right into it.
I love this idea. It's so simple, but so powerful, right? Our whole society works best when we just act like good neighbors. When everyone does their part, looks out for one another, all these huge, complicated systems we depend on, they just work. It's a really comforting thought.
But there's always a but, isn't there? What happens when just being a good neighbor isn't enough? What if the very systems we're told to trust, the ones that are supposed to protect us, are actually hiding some really profound risks? And that's the big question we're digging into today.
So, our first stop in exploring these unseen threats. It's a shocking piece of history, one that was hidden for a long, long time. And this isn't about a system failing by accident. No, this is about a system being used on purpose against its own people.
Just let that sink in. This quote comes from someone who used to live in the Pruitt-Igoe housing project in St. Louis. I mean, it's a total gut punch. It perfectly captures the deep feeling of betrayal from an entire community that had no idea they'd been turned into a giant open-air laboratory.
Let's just walk through this timeline for a second, because believe me, the story just gets worse. So back in the 50s and 60s, smack in the middle of the Cold War, the U.S. Army starts spraying this chemical fog all over a mostly black neighborhood. They wanted to see what a bioattack might look like. The people living there, including kids playing outside, had absolutely no clue. Then, decades later, when people start asking questions, the official response was basically a masterclass in how to deflect and keep secrets. And this right here, this is where the whole official story just completely falls apart. You've got the Army on one side with these reassuring statements, no health risk, nothing to see here. But then the National Research Council investigates, and a much darker picture emerges. They say point blank that repeated exposure can cause cancer or be toxic. And here's the real kicker. They couldn't even do a full risk assessment. Why? Because the Army said key records were either missing or still classified. It's a classic just trust us line. Well, they hide the very data you'd need to actually do that.
Okay, so a secret government experiment is, well, it's terrifying. It's a deliberate, malicious risk. But not all hidden threats are so cloak and dagger. Sometimes they're systemic, they're widespread, and they're tragically common. I'm talking about the global crisis of non-communicable diseases, or NCDs.
Just look at that number, 75%. It's staggering. According to the World Health Organization, 3/4 of all deaths from these kinds of chronic diseases happen in low and middle-income countries. That isn't just a random statistic. It's a sign of a massive, systemic failure in global health.
So what exactly are we talking about when we say NCDs? Basically, these are long-term diseases that you can't catch from someone else. Think heart disease, cancer, diabetes. They're the leading cause of death around the world, kind of like a slow-moving pandemic that's caused by this complex mix of our genes, our environment, and our choices.
And these 4 categories right here, they account for the huge majority of NCD deaths. I mean, they're all household names, but when you put them together, their collective impact is a global catastrophe that, honestly, doesn't get nearly enough attention.
And here we go again, another ghost in the machine. A huge reason we aren't making faster progress against these diseases is that powerful corporate interests are actively fighting against public health policies. Things like taxes on sugary drinks or putting limits on junk food ads for kids, they get delayed or watered down because of intense industry pressure. It's another one of those hidden risks where profits seem to matter more than people.
All right, so when these massive systems are broken, whether it's by government secrecy or corporate greed, the fallout doesn't just stay up in the clouds. It lands right on our shoulders as individuals. And it creates this level of uncertainty that can feel, well, pretty overwhelming. So how do you even start to make sense of all this chaos and manage your own risk? I mean, just think about the world today. We've got geopolitical conflicts, the constant threat of cyber attacks, a shaky economy. It really feels like the ground is always shifting under our feet. In an environment like this, protecting yourself isn't something you can do passively. It takes a real, proactive strategy. And that's exactly where this idea of a personal risk scorecard comes in. Just like you'd go for an annual checkup with your doctor, taking stock of your financial wellness is a super important part of managing your personal risk. It's all about looking at your life and figuring out, okay, where am I strong and where might I be a little vulnerable? So,
Let's start building that toolkit. This next part is all about actionable advice. We're going to look at concrete financial strategies you can use to build a layer of protection, let's call it financial armor, against a pretty uncertain world. One of the most powerful but honestly often overlooked tools in your financial toolbox is something called asset location. Now, it sounds really technical, I know, but the idea is actually simple. It's about putting the right investments in the right kind of account so you can minimize your tax bill and maximize what you actually get to keep.
The easiest way to think about it is with 3 buckets. Bucket number 1, your Roth account. You want to put your highest growth stuff here because when you take money out in retirement, it's completely tax-free. Awesome, right? Okay, bucket 2, your traditional retirement accounts. These are perfect for tax-inefficient things like certain bonds because it lets you put off paying taxes. And then bucket 3, your normal taxable account. You basically use this to round out the portfolio with whatever's left over.
Building that armor also means you've got to avoid the common traps. This list here highlights some of the biggest mistakes people make. Things like underestimating how long you're going to live and how much healthcare is going to cost. Those are huge. And a really big one is assuming your 401k is some kind of magic bullet. It's not. It's usually just one piece of a much bigger puzzle you need to solve.
Okay, let's zoom back out for a minute, because being prepared isn't just about your money. It's about being an informed, engaged citizen. So what does a modern playbook for being a good neighbor actually look like in this crazy, complex world?
First up, your digital life. This is totally non-negotiable today. The strategy is simple: prevent, detect, and react. Prevention is all about making yourself a tough target. Strong, unique passwords, 2-factor authentication, you know the drill. Detection means you got to be vigilant. Check your bank statements. And react is about knowing exactly what to do the second you think there's a problem, so you can shut it down fast and limit the damage.
And this brings us right back around to those systemic health risks. What can you do? Well, the World Health Organization gives us a pretty clear playbook. This is about using your voice as a citizen. Advocate for policies that put our health above corporate profits. Support preventative care. Demand that our systems are built to keep people healthy, not just to treat them after they get sick. This is how we actually become good neighbors on a much bigger scale.
So, we end right where we started, with this idea of being a good neighbor. But hopefully, we see it in a whole new light now. It's not just some passive, folksy idea. In the world we live in today, being a good neighbor is an active role. It means informing yourself about those ghosts in the machine. It means preparing yourself for uncertainty and staying vigilant against all the risk you can see, and the ones you can't. So the real question is, are you ready to be that kind of neighbor?